What if Tensura the Jewel of Tempest Part 2 by KatarinaTempest? Rimuru was taking a break after the entire orc invasion incident and decided to take a stroll through the forest. While walking along, he runs into a monster that was run out of their home by the orcs and lost their entire family to the attack. With nowhere to call home and no family to go back to, Rimuru accepts the monster into the new and growing town as his adopted daughter. The story will follow the main story beats of the light novel, but events will be changed due to a close bond forming between Rimuru and the new monster. The bond will be explored along with the world around the two of them, giving more depth to the characters and allowing them to move outside of the main story's narrative. Chapter 2, Exploring the Town. Katarina's Pav. It did not take long for us to reach the raised area where the stage was set up, and as I looked out there was a sea of faces looking back at me, which only increased my nerves about this whole thing. Thankfully, Dad was a comforting presence next to me, even as the executives stood behind us quietly offering an imposing sight, but also support. Dad raised his hand, and the crowd instantly became quiet at such a simple movement, which shocked me, but he was the leader of the town, so it was only natural for people to listen to him. Thank you all for coming here today. I am sure you have heard rumors in the past few days about a new addition to our town, and I am here to confirm them today. I would like everyone to meet my daughter, KatarinaTempest. Dad said with a voice that commanded attention, the voice of a ruler. I took a deep breath and stepped forward as Dad gave me a little nod even as he stepped aside to let me step forward. Even though I was terrified on the inside, I could see that most of the people in the crowd were simply curious and excited at the news thanks to my skill, soul sight. Seeing this, I was able to build up the confidence to step forward and speak myself, which earned me an approving smile from Dad. Most of the people standing before me were hobgoblins with a handful of tempest wolves in the mix as well, but it was clear every person here was friendly. Hello everyone, I am Katarina, and it's nice to meet everyone. I look forward to making a lot of friends here and hope we can all get along together. I said this clearly, and once I stepped back the applause started, which was just a little too loud for my liking. With ears pressed flat against my head to limit the sound of the applause, I looked back towards Dad hoping that I did enough. Once I finished speaking and looked back towards Dad, he stepped forward once more next to me and started to speak again. I couldn't help but wonder how he spoke to so many people with such ease. As she is my family, I want everyone to treat her the same as me. While she won't have an official executive position, she will still be just under me moving forward after she has had some time to get used to the town. Dad said this, which was a silent promise that I wouldn't be lost in the crowd as time went on, but actually leading everyone if needed. The thought of having to lead everyone someday scared me to the core, and I wasn't sure I would have the strength to do it. It took all my courage to just speak to everyone for a few seconds. Leading them would be a harder challenge altogether. Shaking off the thought for the time being, I could hear everyone in the crowd starting to talk about me once we were done speaking, which I tried to ignore the best I could, even as we walked down off the platform. I let out a deep sigh as I released some of the tension that had built up during the speech and earned a laugh from Dad while doing so. Don't worry, it will get easier the more you do it. I speak from experience after all. You are a princess now, so you will be expected to speak to everyone in the future, or at least be present on the stage while speeches are being given. Dad said this while clearly trying to offer some reassurance. I hope so. That was so nerve-wracking with all those people watching me. I expressed my honest opinion and hoped that it was true, that it would become easier the more I did it, even if I would try to get out of speaking like that as much as possible. With the announcement over with, I was looking forward to exploring the town, only to come face to face with all of the Kijin that were standing behind us. With the announcement over, several of the executives that were standing behind us approached and gave me a few words of encouragement while introducing themselves. While talking with them, I realized that they were all referring to me as princess or lady, and it just felt weird to me, so I told them to just call me Katarina instead, as it felt natural to be called by the name I was given. After this, Dad mentioned showing me around town and even gave me the nickname Kat, as Katarina was apparently too long for him to want to say repeatedly in a conversation. I was eager to see what the town was like, and maybe speak to people in smaller groups where I wouldn't be so nervous, so I quickly accepted the offer and the nickname. I wasn't sure I would want just anyone else to call me Kat, but if it was just Dad or close friends, then I figured it would be okay. Third-person Pav. Rimuru took Katarina on a full tour of the town and some of the surrounding forest during the next few hours. With each new person they met, a conversation was struck up, and Katarina was able to get to know the people living in the town on her terms instead of being overwhelmed with everyone at once. With each conversation she had, her social skills began to improve, slowly, but with noticeable progress. The town was filled with items and tools that were completely foreign to Katarina. She asked Rimuru a lot of questions about every new thing they ran into. The items in question were everyday items used by people in the town to get jobs done. She was curious about everything from basic tools to the food being offered. By the time several hours had passed, the two of them had covered a good part of the residential and planned tourist parts of town, with only a couple of major areas left to see. While different foods were being slowly developed, the choices that were currently able to be made were mostly limited to making sure everyone was full and happy. There weren't that many foods in town just yet which were for indulgence, but that didn't stop Katarina from trying every new food she came across. With each sample she tried, Rimuru had to wonder if she would have any room left for dinner, but figured that if she was full when dinner time came around, then there was no harm in that. Rimuru's POV, there were only a couple places left to visit, and I saved them for last as they were being watched over by a few of the Kijin, and I was thinking of the fact that Katarina should probably try to find some type of hobby to do in her free time. I trusted the Kijin to watch over her the most, as I didn't know how strong she was yet, and I didn't want problems caused if something unpredictable happened while I wasn't around. I had already been informed that she had inherited all of my skills, and knowing how strong some of them were, I felt that there was good reason to be worried. Well, there are 3 more places I wanted to show you before dinner time. I'm hoping you might take an interest in some of the stuff you see and want to pursue it yourself. I said this with the intention of getting her to think about it on her own, even as we walked towards the training grounds. Can I just stay with you all the time? Katarina questioned me while I led the way. Sigh. Well, she will need some time to get used to being on her own again. With the state I found her in, it's only natural she would want someone she trusts next to her. Not only that, but she lost her entire family and now only has me to help fill in that void. I figured that it's possible she was worried about something happening to me as well when she wasn't looking, but hopefully that worry goes away with some time. I thought about how to respond with these realizations for a little while as we neared the training grounds, and I could hear the sound of combat before it was even in sight. You will have to get used to me not being around, you know. I just thought it would be a good chance for you to explore yourself a little while I was still close enough to help if need be. I would still be in the town and a short, thought communication away if you needed something while pursuing your own interests after all. Just as I finished speaking, we walked into the training grounds, and I saw a frown form on Katarina's face at the sight. Hakuro noticed us at this point and started to walk over to greet us, leaving whoever he was instructing on their own for the moment. As we arrived at the training grounds and got a full view of everything that was happening there, I gave a little nod of approval. There were a large number of people training against each other and slowly improving their skills through the training. Hakuro was watching from the side for the time being as he gave out tips and pointers for those he deemed needed them, slowly improving our forces. Why is everyone fighting each other? I thought everyone got along and the town was safe. Are you not going to stop them? Katarina said while clearly shocked at what she was seeing and starting to panic slightly. There is no reason for concern, Katarina. No one here is fighting. We are simply training. The forest can be a dangerous place, so everyone you see here is training so that they can help keep the town safe. Hakuro explained, being the ever-diligent instructor. Oh, that makes more sense. I was worried that the town was being threatened by the people here. Can I help protect the town as well? There are so many nice people here, and I want to be able to help them. Katarina said earnestly, while calming down once more. I decided to step back from the conversation a little while the two of them talked, adding my own input only occasionally. It was clear that Katarina was interested in learning combat as well, and I was more than ready to support the idea, as it meant she would be able to defend herself if the need arose. After a little while it was decided that she would train in the mornings after breakfast, and I would watch on the side for the first week until she was comfortable enough to train on her own. Hakuro would be her personal teacher, but I asked him to take the training a little slower with her than he did me. The last thing I wanted to happen was for her to give up due to the training being too hard. Katarina had only just gotten her new form, so I was worried that she wouldn't be completely used to it for a little while, making training harder than it normally would be. With our visit to the training grounds being quite productive, it was time to head off to the workshops so I could ask Kurobe to forge a weapon for Katarina now that she would have need of one. The walk was peaceful as the two of us enjoyed the city without talking too much this time, as we had already covered most of the areas we were walking through. It seemed like Katarina was out of questions to ask for the time being after a nearly full day of fulfilling her curiosity. With dusk slowly setting over the city, the sky changed colors, painting the horizon in a beautiful orange and pink that was breathtaking, and only served to enhance the city with the lighting. The streets were still busy, but they had calmed down significantly since the afternoon as most people were headed to get dinner. So pretty. Will the city always be like this? I don't want it to change. Katarina finally spoke up after taking in the sight of the city, which was now on the brink of night. Change is important, you know. Without change things would stagnate and get boring. I said this even though I agreed that I hoped the city would know eternal peace, and that was the goal I was working towards even now. Some change is good, but other changes can be bad. A change in hunting grounds can lead to new food and happy family, but a rival clan appearing can lead to hardship and loss. Katarina said this in all seriousness, which was a complete flip from how she was acting just before. I suppose you are right. You are wise beyond your years. Let us both hope for good changes then, and that the bad changes will pass us by without effect. I smiled at her a little, still surprised that she was close to my own size even though she was my daughter. We reached the workshop that Karob was in, and we silently decided to drop such a weighty topic for the time being and focus on the task at hand instead. Heading towards the back of the building, I called out over the ringing of metal and the sound of the forge bellows, trying to get the attention of our resident smith. The front area of the workshop was slowly being filled with apprentices wanting to learn the trade and to help the town by supplying tools and weapons. Giving a wave to the apprentices and telling them that they could continue working, we headed towards the back room. When we entered the back room where Karob was working, he finally noticed us and exchanged greetings and apologies for not hearing us, which I quickly brushed off as no big deal. I was hoping you could make a sword for Katarina here, as she is going to be training with Hakuro starting tomorrow morning. There is no need for a rush job, though, as they will be starting with the practice swords. I said this while turning towards Katarina to make sure she was paying attention, only to see she was lit up in an unearthly glow thanks to the furnace in front of us. Her hair was reflecting the orange glow of the furnace, turning her hair a dark red in the light, while her eyes shone brighter than they normally do. Of course, what type of sword are you looking for, Katarina? Karob curiously asked. I don't know anything about swords, so how about one like Sir Hakuru's? If I am going to be training with him, I think that would be a good place to start. I can always branch out to a new weapon later, right? Katarina was saying this even as she got distracted looking at the weapons laying around the room, no doubt wondering why there were so many different styles of weapons to be had. Karob had mostly been focusing on swords to help supply the security forces, and his dedication was showing as the number of rare and unique weapons had increased greatly since I left for the swamps to deal with the orcs. With the sword choice out of the way, Katarina asked to stick around for a little bit so that she could see how the swords were made. She apparently asked Great Sage if there was any way to lower the volume of the hammer pounding so that she wouldn't be uncomfortable as well, and quickly followed the instructions given to her to add a sound-reducing barrier around herself. With the volume of the hammer lowered, she was able to sit and watch comfortably, and I could see her rising curiosity as the sword Karob was working on slowly took form in front of us. It wasn't all that hard to read her emotions thanks to that ever-active tail of hers, which I was grateful for as it meant I would rarely have to guess her mood. With the sword being finished up, she stood up quickly and declared that she wanted to learn how to make weapons too. I tried to convince her for a minute to take on one learning experience at a time, but it was hopeless, and I eventually dropped it as Karob was more than happy to take her under his wing and train her. The last stop of the day was the clothing workshop, where Shuna was hard at work making sure that everyone had proper clothing to wear. With the visit being mostly to pick up the rest of the clothing that was made for Katarina, I expected it to be nice and short so that we could get to dinner quickly, as I was looking forward to eating. I was a little surprised, but not disappointed, when Katarina showed interest in making clothing but chose not to pursue it, as combat and smithing training would certainly consume a good part of her time already. We had already decided that I would stick around while she was training for the first week so that she could get comfortable with the town while feeling safe with me close by. Once she was okay doing things on her own, we would split up during the training times. This of course didn't mean I would be leaving her unattended, as I fully planned to ask Sue to keep an eye on her at all times just to make sure she didn't cause any trouble while I wasn't looking. Shuna, why don't you show Katarina to the hot springs while dinner is being made for us? I'm sure she would love it. I was hoping to get a little free time to close my eyes and relax after such a busy and eventful day, and who could blame me? That is a great idea. I would love to, Shuna said excitedly even as she started to clean up her work area. It took very little time for Shuna and Katarina to get out the door and headed towards the hot spring once I brought up the idea. The hot springs were only just added to the town, and they were quickly becoming a favorite place to relax after a hard day's work. I was a little surprised that Katarina left so readily with Shuna, but I also thought it was good that she was comfortable with at least one other person already. I didn't have any selfish desires like having Shuna take care of Katarina from time to time and ignoring my parental duty so that I could have some uninterrupted free time, not at all. Third-person POV. The rest of the night went seamlessly as Katarina thoroughly enjoyed the hot springs to the point where she almost fell asleep while sitting in them. Thankfully, Shuna was there close by to wake her up and remind her that dinner was still ahead of them. With the promise of food waiting, the two of them, along with Shion who had joined at some point, quickly got out and dried off before heading to where Rimuru was planning to eat. Everyone decided to eat together, dropping the hierarchy entirely for the night, and simply lived in the moment of peace and calm times. While the meal was simple, while eating with others its flavor improved greatly, as if the simple act of having company to talk with made the meal tastier. The moment Katarina was finished eating, she was already passed out and leaning heavily on Rimuru, which earned a laugh and a comment about how tired she must be after a day full of new and exciting things. Once everyone was done eating and the plates cleaned up, Rimuru brought Katarina to his home, now their home, and placed her gently into the new room that was made just for her in the past couple of days while she was asleep. With a goodnight kiss to her forehead, Rimuru left for his own room that was just next to hers and went to bed himself. Everyone was enjoying the time of peace and expansion as more races and workers flocked to the newly formed city looking for work and a place to stay that would be safe from the monsters of the forest. Unknown to everyone, several groups were talking about what to do about the new monster city, and they were all soon to be caught in the middle of politics and chaos. Chapter 3. Settling in third-person POV. In a well-decorated room sat 4 people, each presenting an image contrary to the others. The person at the head of the table wore a fine white suit. His matching white hair gave off the presence of someone unbothered by those he saw below him. The second was a person dressed in fine, but worn, clothing with part of his chest being bare. His handsome face and short blonde spiky hair did nothing to temper the untamable wildness within him. The third person was a striking female harpy with white hair and wearing a red dress. She gave off an air of elegance, but also indifference, as if she didn't want to be sitting at the table to start with. The final person sitting at the table was a bubbly girl with platinum pink hair tied back into twin ponytails and piercing blue eyes. Wearing a knee-length pink dress with floral designs on it, she stood out among the others for both looking and acting like a child around adults. The dress, while looking simple, was made out of the best materials one could get in the world, and as such offered protection in the mythical grade. Even with her childish behavior, the others in the room seemed to be cautious around her. "Now that we are all here, I have something that I think you will find interesting," the man wearing the white suit said as he pulled out several crystal orbs. "Clayman, hurry up and show us already. I am dying to know what happened," the young girl called out even as she reached for a crystal ball. Yes, I am getting there, Milam. I have several recordings here I think will entertain you," Clayman said as he started to play the first of several. The first couple of orbs showed Kijin easily killing orcs in large numbers as if they were simply reaping a crop. Either cutting down orcs with a blade or destroying them with magic, each one acted like it was just a stroll in the park. As the orbs finished playing, the people in attendance finally spoke up. "Some of those Majin look strong and I would love to have them for my own," the man with spiky blonde hair said while leaning back. "No fair, Carrion. I want to play with them as well," Milam spoke up while pouting softly. "Shall we watch the last orb Clayman has before we say too much?" "I'm sure he has saved the best for last," the harpy said while still putting on the front of indifference towards the whole thing. "Sharp as always, Frey. You are right. This last one is the most interesting," Clayman answered before starting up the last recording. The recording showed a young girl with silver blue hair slowly floating towards the ground in front of the Orc Lord after the Majin failed to kill it in a single blow. While most of the people at the table mistook her for weak, Milam saw through their strength easily and was unable to suppress a smile. Not long after that, the image went black after the new Majin fought a new person who flew into the fight in a rage. The fight was one-sided in the silver blue-haired Majin's favor and, with the image cutting out suddenly, it was unknown who survived. The main question was if the Orc Lord won and evolved or if the Majin won in the end. "Oh man, I wanted to see how things ended. Well, I'll just have to go there myself and see, Milam declared boldly while standing up. Milam, we can't just go into the forest due to the treaty we have. I will send an investigation instead to see what happened, Clayman quickly spoke up to stop Milam. That thing? It was only made for fear of releasing Veldora, so we can just do away with it here and now since we have 3 demon lords, Milam puffed out her chest proudly while speaking. The remaining 3 people looked at each other before nodding, realizing that they could do away with the treaty. For a moment Clayman looked annoyed, but went along with it anyway as he knew there was nothing stopping Milam from doing as she pleased. Very well, then shall we say every person for themselves? Carrion spoke up with a grin. Yes, and we must promise not to interfere with each other, Milam, already halfway out the door, stated. Deal. Everyone responded before Milam flew away. Katarina's Pav, it was the first day I was going to be training under Hakuro and Karob, and to say I was nervous would be an understatement. I was also excited, though, so that helped to balance my nerves out a little at least. After being woken up by Dad this morning, I headed down to the kitchen using my nose to find where food was already ready and waiting for our breakfast. I looked around the house a little while I made my way to the kitchen as it was my first time here. I knew I would be living here for the foreseeable future, so I wanted to familiarize myself with it while I could. The beds, as I had already found out, were made of the softest material I had ever come across, which made them amazing to sleep in. There was a chair and desk in my room made from a smooth dark wood which seemed like the perfect place to relax and work on stuff when I wasn't busy. The rest of my room was fairly empty aside from the sliding door that blocked it off from the hallway and the rest of the house. I walked slowly down the hallway, unable to ignore the feel of the perfectly smooth wood under my bare feet. The walls were made of a similar wood as the floor, which was lighter in color than the chair and desk in my room, creating a nice contrast that was appealing to the eye. While the house was fairly small for belonging to a ruler, there were nice touches added to it, such as plants dotted around that added much-needed splashes of color to the otherwise monotone color scheme. Morning, Dad, I said with a wide yawn, while still trying to wake up from one of the best sleeps I have probably ever had in my life. Good morning, Katarina. I hope you slept well? Dad happily asked. I slept really well, thank you. With ears perked up and tail swaying back and forth, I was eager for the day to start in full. With a quick good morning to Great Sage as well, I sat down and started to eat, even as Dad started to lay out the plans for us today. The general idea for our morning was going to be training with Hakuro for 3 hours, then with Karob for another 2 hours. After that, we would get some food and head to Dad's office so that he could get some paperwork done before the end of the day. The breakfast of eggs and toast was quickly finished and cleaned up, and once we were ready, I eagerly headed out the door. I was wondering what types of things I would learn today and, with those thoughts in mind, I found myself pulling Dad by the hand towards the nearby practice fields which were already lively with the sounds of combat. With better than normal hearing, I could hear the clashing of weapons and the shouts of combat well before we arrived at the open land that was used for training. The number of people here was far less than yesterday, which I was happy for as it meant fewer people would be watching me, and it made finding Hakuro much easier. Sir Hakuro, I called out, trying to get his attention even as he was mercilessly training one of the hobgoblins who I think was named Gobta. Katarina, it's good to see that you are here and ready to learn. Shall we begin? Hakuro wasted no time getting to the point. Yes, I would love to start, I said with a big smile, having no idea what I was getting into. With Gobta defeated, I was soon standing in front of Hakuro and ready to learn. With Dad already watching from the edges of the practice area, there was nothing to stop the training from beginning. As eager as I was to learn, I quickly realized I was also walking straight into pain. My training started off a lot easier than Gobta's earlier bout at least, due to the request Dad made the other day, but within a minute I had already been hit on the head with a practice sword. It's not that I wasn't paying attention, because I was, it was just the fact that he could move so fast. Ouch! Putting a hand to the top of my head and backing away a step to make some distance. It took a second, but I eventually realized that I didn't feel any pain from being hit. I was mostly confused and wanted an answer even as the training continued. I figured the best person to ask in a situation like this was the reliable, great sage, who was more than happy to answer my question. Answer: you have inherited all of Master's skills. This includes the skill, pain nullification. With the quick conversation passing between us, I now knew that I had more skills than I was used to, and I fully planned to explore them as much as possible once I wasn't so distracted by a sword being swung at my head again. I figured that on the plus side I at least had something to do this afternoon while Dad was busy with his work. I was expecting to be bored this afternoon or made to learn about all of the work Dad had to do, so this was a welcome idea that I could explore instead. With the new discovery, I continued the training in earnest thanks to the fact I didn't have to fear getting hurt anymore. This judgment in the heat of the moment, I would realize, was a misinterpretation. I was still able to get hurt, but I wouldn't feel the pain when I was. It quickly became noticeable when I racked up a number of sore spots on my arms and legs as the training continued. I was thankful that I also inherited ultra-speed regeneration, as it meant every injury I sustained healed rapidly, letting me continue well past the point I normally would have given up. I quickly learned the basics of swordplay and earned praise from Hakuro for how quickly I was picking everything up in such a short time. I was by no means a master swordswoman, but I was at least taking steps in the right direction. This was mostly because I wanted to stop getting hit so often. While I knew it was unlikely I would ever land a hit on Hakuro in a fight, I was determined to learn quickly and give it my best try anyway. With such honest praise from my teacher, I found that I needed to, push myself harder so that I could learn more and maybe best him one day. Rimuru's POV with Hakuro focusing on the absolute basics of swordplay for the first lesson, I was thankfully spared from having to join in on the practice. With how fast Katarina was learning the basics, though, I knew this wouldn't last for long and I would eventually get dragged into their training once more only to get beat up by the ruthless teacher, not that I would ever say that out loud. While Katarina was training, I got to sit back and relax a little, which was a welcome change from all of the work and training I normally had piled onto my to-do list. Laying back in the shade of a tree, I spent most of the time talking with Great Sage about skills, theories, and plans I had, seeing what input she could provide on each. This mostly resulted in several new ideas for inventions and a couple of magic theories that I would have to try out later. The 3-hour time limit we agreed on for combat training was over before I knew it, and Katarina improved by leaps and bounds during the first lesson. I was hoping to get away without having to train for a little bit, but it didn't seem like luck was on my side this time. This was only confirmed when Hakuro suggested that I join the training in a couple of days so that I wouldn't get rusty. Groaning on the inside at the suggestion, I gave a nod anyway. I would indeed hate to get rusty on my training, so I will accept your generous offer, I reluctantly agreed, knowing there was no way out of it. Even if I tried to escape, Hakuro would just make my life hell in some other way when I did finally train with him. Excellent. Maybe you can teach Katarina here about some battle wills during your free time as well then. Hakuro was clearly excited and eager to advance Katarina's training wherever possible. I can certainly try to teach her about battle will, but you are the master here so I'm sure you will have better luck should I fail. I was just hoping he wasn't expecting me to teach her to master battle will before he taught it. I felt confident I could at least teach her how it worked in theory, but to teach her how to use it in advanced combat was beyond me. With the short exchange out of the way, and Katarina eager to head to our next stop, we bid farewell to Hakuro and promised to be back tomorrow morning once more. We started to head to the manufacturing area of the town for Katarina's smithing training, and I happily noted that she was already completely healed thanks to the skills that were inherited from me. I talked to her briefly about the skills while we walked and confirmed that they helped during the training due to being able to heal and ignore pain, which put my mind at ease knowing she could shrug off minor injuries now. Once we reached the main roads of town, most of our time was spent greeting everyone we passed by and making sure no issues had come up that needed to be taken care of. The streets were lively, with workers and shopkeepers always heading somewhere with purpose in their steps. It was a sight to see so many different races working together in harmony toward the same goal of making a town where everyone could be happy. The buildings were being put up faster than I would have considered possible not too long ago, and when the orcs arrived to help, I was sure things would go even faster. All of the materials were sourced locally thanks to the vast forest we were living in and the permission from the dryads who watched over it. The wood I was seeing as we passed by the houses and shops would have been considered extremely good quality back on Earth. Roughly 30 minutes after we left the training grounds, we arrived at Kurobi's workshop and Katarina instantly headed inside to start learning about how to forge weapons. I was glad that we made this visit shorter, now that we experienced how long it took to get from the training grounds to here. With only 2 hours here, we would be able to get home around noon for lunch before I had to get started on the mountain of work that was sure to be piling up. Katarina's pav when we entered the workshop. Karob was quick to notice us this time, no doubt because we were expected to arrive. I still couldn't help but marvel at the large assortment of stuff around the room whenever I looked around in this private workshop. There was everything from swords and daggers to hammers and raw material laid out and ready to be worked with or examined at a notice. The weapons were laid out on racks off to the side and kept out of the way from the main area. The tools were hung on hooks and laid out on tables within easy access to the anvils and the forge, and the raw materials were haphazardly piled up in one corner, sorted by what type of material it was. I had a feeling I could blame Dad for the materials just being piled up off to the side like that, after looking over the rest of the room and seeing how organized it was. "Hello, I'm here and ready to learn," I said cheerfully. "Ah, I was wondering when you were going to be here. I just finished up a piece, so you arrived at the perfect time," Karob informed us in a matter-of-fact way, even as his voice held an undertone of excitement. The lesson didn't start out how I was expecting, with me just getting right into it and trying different things out. Instead, Karob started me off with teaching me about the different metals and what each one needed for a successful item to be made. There were differences not just between iron and magisteel, but also between the different hardnesses of the metals themselves. A small difference in material composition could apparently make a weapon incredibly fragile or really strong depending on how it was used. With the lengthy introduction into the art of smithing out of the way, I was tasked with crafting simple knives so Karob could test how well I had paid attention and how well I understood what I was told. The reason for me making knives was really quite simple. In fact, it was so simple that I couldn't argue with the logic being used. The knives would take very little material to be made, so none was wasted, and if they weren't amazing, they could be used in places where it wasn't as important that the blade was perfect. Karob watched as I started on the first knife I was to make, giving pointers as I started the smithing process. I was working with iron to start with, so the heat management, while important, wouldn't ruin a piece if I messed it up and let the iron get too cool while working on it. Magisteel was apparently a lot more particular about the heat needed, and if you messed it up, the entire item could be ruined. With the daunting task of forging magisteel in my future, I was more than happy to get the basics of managing heat and learning how to shape the metal on something that was much more forgiving. The first knife that I made had a good overall shape to it, but when I went to temper the blade, it warped fairly severely, making the entire knife useless, much to my disappointment. With the first knife being a failure in the end, I gracefully accepted the teaching from Karob and started on my second attempt. The second attempt at making a knife went a lot better than the first one. In fact, I finished the knife properly and had a functioning item in my hands afterward. The main issue with my second one was that the metal I used had too many impurities for Karob's liking. I only had time for one last blade and I was determined to make it perfect, so perfect, in fact, that I would be the best in the world. I knew that best in the world was a bit optimistic considering it was only my third attempt at making anything like this, but at least it got a nod of approval. I might have cheated by asking for help from Great Sage, so I could get the perfect iron, but the entire forging process was all me. The shape was good, the temper perfect, the edge nice and sharp. Karob suggested that I keep my third attempt as a reminder of what I had learned today, and promised to teach me more when I was able to come back tomorrow. With food on the mind after doing so many physical activities today, I was eager to find some lunch with Dad now that the morning was officially over. The sun was fully overhead when Dad and I left the workshop, setting the town in a bright light. With no shadows to dampen the colors of the houses and flowers filling the front of most buildings, the entire place seemed peaceful. The only thing that ruined the peace was everyone around talking in the streets. I didn't really mind all the talking as it let me listen in to conversations as we passed and get to know people without them being considerate of their words towards me. With the activity of the town, and everyone stopping to greet us on the way by, it took far longer than it normally would have to get back to the main building that housed most of the executive work. I didn't really mind the delay, as I was able to get to know everyone a little more and see how much they respected Dad. I wasn't really sure if they respected me in the same way, as I had only just arrived here, but in the future, I was hoping to live up to their expectations. While we walked, I inquired about the town and how Dad managed to make it. He seemed to enjoy telling me the story about how he reincarnated as a slime, and I was amazed by everything I was learning. Dad is from another world? That is so amazing. My excitement must have shown as we talked, as he had a knowing glint in his eyes as he continued. We reached the office building around the same time as he finished the story, which I would consider perfect timing. I know you are hiding things about the story, just so you know, I said, wanting to see his reaction. What? Shoot. It's that skill you have, isn't it? So, you can tell when someone is lying or omitting the truth? Dad was clearly curious, and slightly surprised. I'm not surprised you guessed how I did it, but yes, that is right. It's really useful when talking to people. I was beaming with the knowledge that I was able to see through him and was hoping I could get the rest of the story at some point. Rimuru's POV, that soul sight skill Katarina had, was something fearsome if used correctly, it would seem. She saw right through me as if it was nothing at all. I suppose I will have to eventually tell her about Veldora at some point, but at least she won't be scared when the orcs arrive in town in the near future. That was what I thought anyway, but life has a way of laughing in your face. There were already sandwiches ready and waiting in my office thanks to sending word ahead of our arrival, and we wasted no time before starting to eat them. While we ate, I started to flip through the papers that had piled up on my desk to see what kind of stuff I was dealing with. Most of it was building and crafting requests for the troops we had here in the town. The Goblin Riders would be back in the town after leading the orcs to their new living places, so I wasn't expecting them to be back for some time yet. They were already equipped anyway due to the fight we had just been involved in. Sigh. I better get to work on all of this before it piles up any higher. With that in mind, I continued to flip through the pages, asking my trusty partner what she thought about each document. A few minutes later, I heard Katarina take a sharp breath in, causing me to turn and see what was wrong. Is something wrong? You sounded like you were in pain. I gave a visual inspection while saying this and saw nothing of note to explain the sound she made. I'm sorry, I was just trying out magic sense, and it was a bit more than I am used to. I managed to limit it for now while I get used to the sensation, Katarina said apologetically before laying back down on the couch. Don't push yourself too hard then. It's a useful skill, but will take some time to get used to. Satisfied with the answer, I turned back to my own work after learning that Katarina was going through each of the skills she received from me to learn what each did. This was being facilitated through Great Sage, as she simultaneously helped me with my own work. Truly an amazing help and someone I couldn't do without. Several hours later I sat back into my chair and let out a deep breath. I had finally caught up on all of my work and had a clean desk once more. I knew this wouldn't last for long, but chose to ignore that for the time being. Looking around, I noticed Katarina was still on the couch deep in thought while learning about the skills, causing me to tap my foot on the floor to get her attention. So, how is it going over there? I just finished all of the work I had to do here. I was unable to suppress a smile as I saw the yawn she let out before replying. I finished going through them, but there are still several I don't really understand. I was planning to explore them in more depth later when I had some more free time. Maybe tomorrow? She said this calmly, but there was a hint of frustration as she spoke. Don't worry, I don't understand all of my skills either. I rely on my partner when that happens. Katarina was clearly a little surprised by my admission but relaxed a little when she realized that not even I was all-knowing. I held out a hand to her, pulled her up off the couch, and led the way to the door. Come on, little one. They are preparing a feast tonight to welcome you and you wouldn't want to disappoint everyone by not showing up, right? I was sure most of the preparations were already complete. Wait, a feast? For me? Will there be new types of food? Yes, and yes. It's a feast to welcome you to the town, and I'm sure they found something delicious for the occasion. With that bit of reassurance, I led the way out of the building. With night having already almost completely fallen over the city while we were inside, it was easy to find the location of the feast due to a massive fire in our undeveloped area of town. Sue, along with some of the goblin riders that had already returned, seemed to have caught a night spider and started boiling it within its own shell. The shell made a surprisingly good pot to cook food in, and with Shuna overseeing the process, it was sure to taste amazing. With a large feast to indulge in and good company to enjoy, the first full day of Katarina's stay here officially came to an end. After an hour of enjoying the food and company, we eventually called it a night and headed back home to rest up. With a bright future filled with curiosity and learning, things were looking up. I was eager to see where the town would go next as new races joined us and started to work as well.